Hello, everyone. This is the SMC Journal podcast where we're talking about performance and reliability in today's modern enterprise IT. I'm Scott Moore. Thank you so much for being with us. So you're going to hear me talking more and more in the near future about not only just performance, but about reliability, resilience, chaos, a lot of other terms, observability, because we're branching out and we're talking about more than just performance engineering, because there are areas in modern IT where other roles are taking over some of the performance engineering tasks. And it's not just about testing, it's all about that whole engineering piece. And there are specialties within those. But you're going to hear me talking a lot more about that because IT is changing and we want to be where the change is at. So site reliability engineering. What is that all about? Is a site reliability engineer what a performance engineer wants to be when they grow up? Are they better than a performance engineer? Do they know more? Is a performance engineer still needed in today's modern IT world? We're going to talk about that today, and my guest has been a very well-known performance engineer and is currently a site reliability engineer and knows both sides of that, both worlds. So we'll talk to him about that today. And that's the subject: performance engineering versus site reliability engineering. Can we all just get along? Is there still a need for both? Or is it all or nothing? We'll find out. Before we do that, let's talk about the sponsors that make the SMC Journal podcast possible. This episode is sponsored by MicroFocus and the LoadRunner Solutions family. That includes LoadRunner Professional, Enterprise, Cloud, and Developer. You know, performance matters. Did you know that LoadRunner Solutions have the largest community of practitioners in the world? Join that community at community.microfocus.com, scan the QR code, and check out the LoadRunner family page on performance engineering, as well as their YouTube playlist that we've got links for in the show notes on smcjournal.com as well as YouTube. This episode is sponsored by Supervisor. Stop losing money with a slow website. With Supervisor, you can continuously track the performance of your code and your hosting, predict site page load speed with high user volumes, and an easy one-click load test solution. Find out more at supervisor.com. This podcast is sponsored by Bryte Payment Solutions. They provide merchant services for a wide variety of credit card companies. They take most major credit cards at the lowest rates and fees possible, and they can help your business generate higher revenue through a variety of payment solutions they have, including their own point-of-sale equipment and custom software. If you take credit cards for your business, you should contact them and see how they can help you. Go to brighteps.com and tell them Scott Moore from the SMC Journal sent you. My guest today is one of my favorite people in the performance and SRE world. It is none other than Stephen Townshend, a great content creator, all his own. I'm bringing up his website now for you to check out. His podcast is called Slight Reliability, and you can check it out as slightreliability.com. He also had a podcast previously called Performance Time, where he was a performance engineer. There's many episodes of that out there on the internet, and there's an entire archive out there on YouTube. I highly recommend it. You will learn a lot if you are a performance engineer. He is now a site reliability engineer, and he's been podcasting all about his transition into this new world, and then what he's learned, he's sharing with everybody else. So it's very valuable insights into the world of the SRE in today's modern DevOps culture. So it talks a little bit about Stephen here and some of the things that he's been doing and talking about. He actually just got back from AWS reInvent. Now, Stephen is known for taking MS Paint and making his own graphics out of this. And he's very creative in how he does this. And every time he shares it, we all in the performance realm, we all love it and talk about how great it is. But it kind of separates him from the rest of the content out there and the noise that you see on social media. So I'm really excited to have him on the show today. So I want to get right into this interview and start talking with Stephen. Hey, Stephen, welcome to the SMC Journal podcast.
It's really awesome to be here. How are you going, Scott? How are you?
I am great, and it's awesome to have you on the show. I'm honored that you would actually be on my podcast. I've been wanting this to happen for actually months, believe it or not.
I can't believe we haven't spoken yet on a show of some kind.
I mean, we have technology today, right?
Yeah.
No, I watch your podcast. I see your post. I read your stuff. Love it. And for people who are, mutual friends or people who follow maybe both of us, they see a little bit of our banter back and forth. We're kind of poking each other. I want everybody to know I love this guy and I love everything that he does, and we really get along well. It's just one of those things where you just got to poke the bear every once in a while, right?
No, I do appreciate our relationship. Often people are quite serious in the industry, and it's nice to have a bit of banter now and again.
You are probably the most qualified person I know to talk about performance engineering versus site reliability engineering because you've had your finger in both pies. You have been a performance engineer. You've made a transition into being an SRE. I think you consider yourself full-time SRE at this point, and you've learned a lot. I've heard you talk about your journey for that. I'd like for you to share a little bit about what you think I guess the biggest things you've learned between making that transition which from that performance engineering mindset to an SRE mindset. What's different and what's still the same?
I think it's worth mentioning sort of the driving factor why I made the change. And I think it's probably common in a lot of organizations. With the title performance engineer, I found myself being pigeonholed into running load tests for projects, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But then I could see other opportunities or areas where we could probably do something else which would have a much bigger impact, mitigate performance risk a lot better. But I wasn't having the opportunity to do those things. I wasn't being invited to those conversations. Things such as maybe we could do a canary release and it would reduce our dependence on this big complex load testing that we're running. Or maybe if we had better observability or monitoring in production, then we could have a lot more confidence about what's currently happening and what the potential risk is of making a change. So that was the driving factor, I think, of making the shift. I wanted to have a bigger impact, and I felt like I wasn't being invited to the table as a performance engineer.
Interesting. I hear that a lot when I go in as a consultant. Sometimes you get heard as a consultant in an organization just because they're paying you a lot more money to be there for a shorter period of time. And the people that work there full time all the time have the same answers and they know their stuff, but they're not taking as seriously, I guess. And do you find that that's sort of a common thing where they tell the performance testing team, okay, leave the big decisions to the big boys here and you go run your little test, you give us the results, we'll figure out what to do from there, stay in your lane. Do you think that's a real common thing out there today?
Yeah, I would say apart from sort of unicorn companies and startups who are doing stuff maybe quite well from the start, big enterprises and government departments all over the place are probably adapting that. And it was quite frustrating for me because I came from that consulting background. So I would be invited in and I would say something and the company would say yes, and we'd go ahead and do it. And then I went internal and everything changed. It took a little bit of time, but yeah, I've been on both sides of that fence.
Yeah, and that is probably the reason why I find myself just being a consultant, because I feel like if I worked for a company full time for too long, I would tick everybody in that company off so bad they would fire me anyway, just because, I don't mind. I'm one of those people, I have to get this thing done. And if I have to burn the building down to do it, or make everybody mad in order to get it done, that's what I'm going to do. But either we're going to get it done or you're going to get rid of me so I can go help somebody else. And I don't know, I'm just at that point of my career, and I'm sure you're probably at that point too, where you've seen enough, you've done enough, there are common answers, common solutions to some of these performance issues. And people just are still, I guess they're not learning from previous mistakes. You think as a site reliability engineer, that changes the way you get heard, I guess, just because you're in this other role and you're with other people or other groups, or how they're defined. I mean, what is it?
I think it's a complicated situation. I think one thing that is flavoring everything about this conversation is that when I was a performance engineer, I had the title and I was very confident in that work. So I was very confident to say, what I think needed to happen and deal with any situation. In the world of SRE, it's so broad and I'm so new to it. I feel I don't feel comfortable saying I'm an SRE almost. Just sort of making up as I go along in a way. Yeah. But I do think that just having the title, I got to talk to different kinds of stakeholders. So, senior leadership were inviting our team to conversations or asking how we could do things. And I think there's something about performance engineers tend to work in pre-production environments and projects as part of delivery. Tend to. I'm not saying they all do. That was my experience anyway. Whereas SREs are mostly focused on production. And there's something about being the group of people who are working in production which gives you more authority, or, you know what I mean? I don't know. Mm-hmm. Something about that which gives more attention to the work that you're doing.
You touched on something, and it's somewhere I wanted to go anyway, and it's a good time to talk about this. Knowing so much. I was just talking to Joe Colantonio about this, and I think the episode came out today as we're recording this, where I say, I think we're expecting a lot out of people today. Systems, the way we're developing and delivering software, are more complicated and complex than they ever have been. Observability is way more complicated to set up, in my opinion, than traditional APM. The environments have changed. The infrastructure's changed. But we are expecting everybody to know everything about everything. That's the one thing about an SRE that I guess I got this beef about, how much you have to know as an SRE, whereas a performance engineer, I care about performance. I care about it throughout the whole life cycle. Care about it as hardware, software, app stack, network, everything. And I want to be involved in everything. But with an SRE, when I say everything, I have this minute scope of performance. I don't care about functionality, really. I mean, I do, but I don't care about security. There's somebody else for that. But then when it comes to SRE, I get this notion from what I've heard. It's like, okay, you got to be a person who can find it, fix it, reduce the toil, no matter where it comes from, no performance, as well as a performance engineer, no functionality, no security, no all this stuff. And it's like, I think that's why we're hearing a lot about burnout now. Do you agree with that?
I completely agree. I think that SRE is such a wide and deep scope of work. It almost covers everything. It's just impossible to know everything and be an expert in everything. So I think I like what Sebastian Feets talks about when he talks about the different pillars of SRE work. And actually, if you're a team of SREs or an individual, you really can only focus on one or two pillars at a time. And you might move around. So I'm probably focusing mostly in the area of observability. Right? Mm-hmm. I'm not a great expert in incident management, for example, or automating infrastructure. That's not my area of expertise or interest right now. I might do that in the future. But if I try and do that and this right now, I'm going to burn out. And I've been there, and it sucks, and I'm not doing it again.
So maybe on an SRE team, there's still a specialist on that team that focuses on performance and observability, and they continue to stay in that as their thing. So an SRE over performance, an SRE over security. So a SLEP, a SLEP, a SLEP. I don't know what you would call that person. I've been talking about the software lifecycle engineer, the SLE, which that has taken off like a lead balloon. Nobody cares about that. But I've always said it's a specialization, but it's across the whole life cycle. So it's almost like a mentor or coach who can dive in at any area of that life cycle and help the developers in their small area of feature functionality, shift left, performance testing, teach them how to fish, teach them how to do that, but only in their area. I don't expect them to be a database performance expert. That's what the database administrators are for. But as a SLE, I could also assist those database administrators or engineers. I may not know everything that they know in that tier, but I know enough to help them kind of keep the machine running smoothly and efficiently. And I think that model could work well with the SREs. But this is what you just said. That's the first time these pillars I've ever heard that mentioned. So I'm glad to hear that we're moving that direction.
I think it also depends on the kind of company you work for. If you work for, say, Google or Facebook, and there are literally thousands of SREs around you, you can leverage the power of that community. There's someone else out there who's going to be an expert in the thing that you're up against. Whereas if you work for a startup and you're in a tiny company and you end up being in charge of everything. I mean, luckily with a startup, probably the scope of the technology is not out of control yet, but you're going to have to be a lot more generalist, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. So in let's say an enterprise level company, and I'm not the size of a Google, but let's just say you're maybe on the Fortune 2000 list, Global 2000 list, and you've got either a few hundred employees to a couple of thousand employees. is there a place for both SRE and a performance engineer to work hand in hand on some things, or does it's have to be one or the other?
I think there absolutely is a need for both. The performance engineering skill set. I mean, don't get me wrong. I talk about SRE a lot now, and I've kind of left. I deliberately don't talk about performance engineering as much as I used to, but I think it's incredibly valuable, and it's the skill set of being able to take something new, which is coming, a technology, service, or feature or solution, and be able to think about it and plan it and do what's required to mitigate the risk. It's not what SREs tend to do to that level of detail. One of the things that I think performance engineers do a lot better than SREs is the analysis of large amounts of data, for example. Good performance engineers have for a long time have been doing things such as plotting raw data and seeing behavior of systems and all kinds of patterns and things, which I don't see SREs doing a lot of. I see, looking at aggregated metrics and saying, what's the percentile of this, or what's the SLO percentage of this, and not really analyzing big data in a way which is satisfying to me, for example.
When we talk about gathering all this data for observability is not just APM, and we know that observability is more, it's answering a different question. We have different problems we have to solve now. Observability really gets to the heart of how well is my business doing? How well are my applications doing? Hopefully it tells me that. But on that note, observability, we don't hear about necessarily observability and performance in the same sense. We hear about reliability and resilience. So is performance and quality and security all wrapped up in reliability and resilience, or is that still considered a separate discipline?
My perspective is, and I got this from SRE a year or two ago, is that reliability has three components to it, and one of them is performance. And the other one's correctness, and I can't remember what the other one is. But anyway, so I think that SREs look at performance, but probably not to the level of detail that a performance engineer does. So it's a more specialist skill set. And I don't think that most SREs by nature are focused on production. I think that's where performance engineers, they know what to do before production as part of delivery. So SREs are more focused on operations, then I think performance engineers are much more specialized and experienced in the world of delivery.
Okay. So in the realm of developing a continuous performance strategy, is continuous performance a pre-production, post-production, dev, ops, something in between? Who sets that up and who makes sure that it's running like a well-oiled machine?
That's a good question. I don't have the answer to that one.
I think it's somebody who has to be focused on the performance aspect of it. Just like when you're creating a CI/CD pipeline for functional automation, you've got to have that performance piece, and then you've got to have a security. In other words, it's all got to be, and that's where we're moving. Everything is going to have to be continuous, which is why I continue to say we've got to have a specialist in there to look at that to make sure that piece is taken care of, that understands queuing theory and the basic skill sets and building blocks of performance engineering. I don't know who I would, if somebody came up to me and said, who do I go to learn this from? What book do I read? What course do I take in school to make me a great performance engineer that can keep the enterprise running? I don't know where to send them. Do you?
No, it's very difficult. The advice that I've given people have reached out to me before, and I've had quite a lot of people reach out saying, how do I get into this? How do I get better at it? Is you really need to find a mentor. That's the only way that I was able to get the skills that I had, by finding great mentors. And you have to be quite lucky, I think, because in my opinion, there's a small set of really good, amazingly good performance engineers in the world. And if you're lucky enough to work with one of those, then it opens up so many doorways. But if you're sort of isolated trying to make sense of this stuff, I could see it's very challenging.
The only other way I know is to experience a lot of, oh my God, what did I just do moments? The school of hard knocks, and also the, okay, well, let's try this. Those moments lead up to, but that takes a lot longer to get there. I really feel like there needs to be something that gets people there faster. Can I help somebody not step on the landmines that I stepped on for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, till I figured it out? I think that's really needed in the marketplace, which is why I still like to do this kind of content, because I just don't know where else to send them to. And minus the dozen or so people who are speaking enough about it, just not a whole lot. I mean, there's a lot of people who speak about front end performance, like, the Google Core Web Vitals and how that makes sense, and how you customize the browser and removing third-party JavaScript calls when you can, and all of that. But that still doesn't address database specific performance issues or network performance specific issues, or once it leaves your code, what happens on that infrastructure. I mean, there's all those areas that need to be thought about. At a base level, it's just when resources can give up, when you run out of resources, things just go to crap. So you've got to figure out where that resource is being at. Now, it's easy to say that, but then figuring out and being able to get to that root cause is a lifetime of learning. So
I think that's one of the things that, as a performance engineer, I think I could have learned something from SRE concepts at that time. So I've been reasonably critical of SLOs in the past, and I still am to a degree. I think they're overrated in terms of the value they're providing necessarily. Okay. But I do think that SRE has this concept of, let's start with just answering a simple question. Can our customers use this service that they're providing? Are they able to use it effectively? And if we can answer that question, that's the first thing that we do. And I think that helps you simplify at least that starting point of, is there a problem? Because obviously there's so much technical complexity. There's so many things you could test, could monitor at a billion different layers and levels. To just track it all, great. But can the customer consume the service? That's the most important thing. And then there's the next bit of, okay, they can't. There's a problem. Now we've got to drill down and get into that. But starting from that point is a good starting point. And often I think it's the wrong way around. We start with all these technical metrics and monitoring, and we test all these technical API calls, and it's like, what are you doing? What outcome are you trying to achieve here? Or what's the risk you're trying to mitigate?
Right. Because if you're not going to do anything with the data you're getting, you're just creating noise for yourself. You're just creating work. You could be doing something else. If it's not actionable data, why are you doing it? And I think that's something that's really good today, that we are questioning that, and we are going back and saying, why are we just running checkboxes and tests that we aren't getting any value out of? It's all about that value. And that sort of leads me into, to ask you, as an SRE, to bring value, what is sort of a day in the life for you versus what it would have been as a performance engineer?
Well, things have changed a lot. So right now I'm actually a developer advocate. So my work has changed significantly in the last 5 weeks. I'm creating a lot of content and consuming content and thinking about things. But I will be doing SRE work next year to help operate our cloud product. And I did this SRE for 1.5 years. And so the daily work was a bit like this. It was about meeting with different teams, different stakeholders and teams to find out, to draw out from them where their opportunities are around, how they operate their software. I would spend a lot of time going in, grabbing a bunch of monitoring data from different systems to tell them, hey, hello, team so-and-so, this is the level of reliability you're currently at, because they had no idea. Mm-hmm. And using that as an opportunity to say, there's opportunities here and here and here. Did you know, for example, that you receive 3 incidents every single day from the call center who don't understand that this is actually a business rule that's firing off and nothing to do with the technical issue? Oh, okay. Wow, there's an opportunity there. We need to retrain those call center staff. We need to improve documentation. So there's a lot more talking, a lot of workshopping, a lot of research, a lot of analysis of data. But that was me working in an enablement team. And I don't think most SREs are like that. Most SREs probably are what I'd call working in value stream teams, where they are actually part of the team who's delivering and operating the software. And I guess that's a lot more hands-on than what I was doing.
I could talk to you about this all day. I know we're limited on time. I think maybe we should have you back on the show as soon as we can. I know we're towards the end of the year, but one other thing I wanted to bring into this conversation was about the work culture, because we started off talking about how you felt as a performance engineer not being brought into conversations. But when you're doing true DevOps and true SRE work, there's this idea of a blameless culture. And I think it's really key to have that to move forward. Can you talk a little? I think I've heard you talk about that a little bit and how important that is to being able to get your work done.
My view is, and I guess it's flavored by books that I've read, but also my own experiences, is that we're entering, you said earlier that things are getting more and more complicated, and they really are. We're getting to the point where technology solutions and the landscape that we work in and the business that we work in is so incredibly complex and distributed that there's no way that we can know in advance what to do to get a good outcome. It is literally impossible. The only thing we can do is have a hypothesis, run an experiment, see what happens, get feedback, and do that quickly so that we can, and as part of that, we're going to fail all the time. And the only way that you can fail in a way which is like, this is a good thing because we learned something and now we know not to do that or do something new, is to have that blameless culture. And I see a lot of sort of non-traditional technical organizations are holding on to this. We must control things. We must deliver things by a deadline. We must, control the pathway. Please draw a Gantt chart for the next 18 months of all the things you're going to do. And that is not the way to succeed in the modern digital era. I guess that's my view. And I don't think that culture needs to be a fluffy thing. It can be, it's really about the way that we work, not about, the attitude that you have necessarily.
Got it. So I guess you've seen the latest Catchpoint SRE report. I talked about that a couple of episodes ago. They just released it. It was the fourth year they released it, and they had some great takeaways, and they talked about this blameless culture being really important for that. So definitely, if you haven't looked that up, it's a great report to read. We also know that SREs, from that report, SREs are actually making a difference. They are reducing toil. We are beginning to see them chip at that rock to reduce that toil in the company, and that is bringing a lot of value. The ones that are taking advantage of doing it right are seeing tremendous value. They're called top performing organizations, TPOs. Same with observability. Top performing organizations are reducing the time to get to the root cause of a bottleneck by 90%. But the ones who aren't getting it aren't really seeing the value because they're taking out the things they don't like about it, and they're just doing it their own way. So I really can't wait to see where we go with this and how people embrace the culture properly to get work done over the next, say, 18, 24 months. I hope that it continues to get better, and I think it will. Do you have any other thoughts about SRE versus performance engineer, or just about site reliability in general before we close out the show?
I think if performance engineering had been, invited to the table, that it had been what I wanted it to be, which was really to think about the performance of the services that we're providing in the grand context of things. Everything from the way we design software to the way we release it, to that feedback loop, and everything else in between, then I think I probably would have stayed a performance engineer, which is a real shame because I love that field of work. But for whatever reason, many companies in the industry are not seeing performance engineering as that. And I think it's a huge missed opportunity. So I guess what I'm saying is I love performance engineering. I think it is very valuable and a hugely interesting area of work. I think it has such depth, you can never learn anything. And just because I've changed the title and it's opened up new doorways for me doesn't mean that, performance engineering doesn't have that value still.
We know who your first love is. And if maybe I've got some work to do on my side, maybe I can help educate the industry for this, and we could bring you back over to the dark side. Maybe one day. You never know.
My mind is open to that. Yeah.
Thank you again for being on the show, Stephen. You're always welcome. If you got any other news, send it to me, and I'll always, put you on the show to have a voice. So thanks again for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much, Scott. It's an honor to be on, honestly. It's been great to chat.
All right. Thank you. Stephen, thanks so much for being on the program today. I really feel like this is kind of a call to action to me to do more in the realm of education, not just entertainment, but education and standardization in the performance engineering realm. Why aren't performance engineers being brought to the table of serious discussion when it's talking about making those applications better? I don't understand it, but we're going to get to the root of that, and it's something that I want to look into myself. So thank you for that. What do you think about the conversation? Are you moving from one to another? Are you now a site reliability engineer? Does the definition of that work for you that we talked about? Or Does it? Find out, I would like to find out what you want to talk about on that realm. You can reach me at scottmoore.consulting through LinkedIn or through Twitter. You can also email me directly at help@scottmoore.consulting. That's my email address. And if you like this kind of content, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel so you'll be notified when we have new episodes of this podcast and our other shows that pop up on YouTube. It would be great. Love to hear from you. Let me know who you'd like for me to interview next or the types of topics you'd like for me to talk about. For this episode of the SMC Journal Podcast, this is Scott Moore saying thanks again for being with me, and bye-bye.